Good morning, friends. Hello. Hello, hello. How are you today? I pray you are well and good and whole. All happening well with you on this beautiful day. Hey, Linda. Good morning. Hi, Jamie. Hope you're doing well from the car. Hope things are good. Glad you're well. Happy St. Andrew's Day. Indeed it is. How did you know? It's what we're going to talk about today because why not? Good morning, everybody. Hello, Donna. Glad you're here. Don't want to pick up the new trifocals. Oh, gosh. The indignity of age. Good gracious. Good morning, everybody. Oh, you read the title. Oh, very good. See, I never know how that works out, whether the title actually shows up or not. I don't always know what you all see here. So, um, when did they say me? Very funny. Wow. We'll talk about that too. So, I don't. Glorious. Good morning, everybody. We'll get going this morning. Let's do this thing. It is the 30th day of November, the last day of November. We're in the last month of the year coming up here. And on this Wednesday at 11:11, it is St. Andrew's Day. Thank you very much. A great and beautiful day, not only of my namesake, the great St. Andrew, but also of the people of Scotland. So if you have if you are a part of the Scottish ilk, today is your day. Although St. Andrew has a number of different countries that are considered the patron saint of both the patron saint of Russia, the patron saint of Greece and Romania, lots of places. But it is Scotland that most carries Andrew in its heart, I think. And so I want to talk a little bit about Andrew, and I want to talk a little bit about saints, and I want to talk a little bit about the meaning of these days. That we we in the Protestant traditions aren't, we're not big on the intercession of saints for us. But it is not because we don't think it's real or we don't think it's important, but we think that it is often it is our invitation really to speak to Jesus that is more important than necessarily to calling to those who have gone before us. That ours is a relationship with the Maker who's called us to be his friend. But that doesn't change 2,000 years of Christian history and the lives of the saints and the martyrs that are a part of this. We'll come back to Andrew, but I want to in a second. But I want to set this up of understanding, what this means. I have on my shelf one of the many books behind you. I have my copy of the Lives of the Saint Butler's Lives of the Saints. This is kind of the Catholic tome, but it is. There's a lot of times when they were just, these were just saints. They weren't Catholic saints. They were just people as a part of the church. For about 1,500 years, that was kind of how it went. So the Lives of the Saints are every day lays out the different patron saint of the day, and I keep this on my shelf, and occasionally I'll pull it out. Like this is one of my bad day books. Like if I'm having a bad day in ministry, this is one of my bad day books. I think it's all important for us to have bad day things, whatever they might be. For maybe for you, it's going to Dunkies and getting an extra large, thing with whipped cream on it. Maybe it's but the things that encourage us in the midst of our struggle. For me, it's actually Butler that does is one of the things that I'll pull out because it is simply a little half page, maybe full page biography of the saint of the day. Now, am I then saying prayers of intercession to that saint? No, it's not really. But the story of the martyrdom of whoever it is always puts in perspective for me what it is this walk is about. When you look up the Andrews in Saint, and not just there are many. There's Saint Andrew himself, which we'll talk about in a second, but there's also many namesakes. Obviously, like I'm named after Andrew. Like there were many in the 2,000-year history of the church that were named Andrew, and in all of and if you look up just the saints named Andrew and figure out what kind of day they had. You get the Vietnamese saint Andrew Duloc, who dies in 1839, and the persecution for them by the Buddhists was particularly gnarly. That they would actually take people apart by their joints, and that they would kind of break their joints apart all the way to the torso, and then finally behead them by the time before they lost consciousness. I mean, the ability of humans to be cruel to each other is amazing, and it was because Andrew's fate, and Saint Andrew's fate was no different either. That the story of Saint Andrew is one where, if you remember, he is first called by he is one of the first called by Jesus, if not the first called. They are Peter and Andrew are walking down the beach. They're brothers, and he sees Jesus. And he goes back to his brother and he says, I've seen the Messiah. Like, you need to come check this out with me. And they go and they leave their nets. They're sons of Zebedee. They leave their father Zebedee and they follow Jesus. These are the first of the disciples that show up for him. I always make the joke that, I was, before I went to seminary, I was a fisherman, and I was a fisherman named Andrew. You'd think I would have figured it out earlier, that I might be called to the ministry. And Andrew's call is no different. And Andrew is, he's mentioned a few different times in the Gospels, but one of the times I want to hold up today, just because I think it's so. And then we'll talk some more about how we get to how he becomes patron saint, and how these things play themselves out over the history of the church, and I think this has some bearing for us today too. So just stay with me on that. But Andrew comes back. Andrew is present while they are in the wilderness, and Jesus has the 5,000 there. And they're trying to figure out what to do. There's 5,000 people in the middle of the woods. Okay, there's no woods, but in the middle of the wilderness, in the middle of nowhere, no towns around, and they're all hungry, and they're trying to figure out what should we do. And it's Andrew that brings to Jesus the boy. If you remember the story right, there's they check the purse, and Philip's got the purse, and he looks at the purse and says, we have 200 denarii in the purse, which is a good sum, but he says, it's not enough to buy bread for all these people. Even if we had someplace to buy bread, which we don't, even if we were to go to take them all to a town, we still don't have enough to feed, we don't have enough money to feed them. And Andrew kind of sidles up and says, well, there's a boy here with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what's that among so many people? And it's, again, if you remember the story, Jesus will take those 5 loaves and 2 fish and feed the 5,000. It's one of the great miracles of Jesus that people will attest to. And there are scholars, by the way, that say if there are 5,000, really there were 15,000, because you really don't. That doesn't that representation would have really, that the way counting was done there, they wouldn't have necessarily, they would have counted more by households than they would have counted by people. That it would have actually been, then, that children or others would not necessarily have figured into the count. Whatever the real number was, whatever it was, the miracle itself stands. But it is Andrew. It is Andrew. I've always loved this. It is Andrew that is the point of hope, the point of strength, that has no idea what's going to happen, that has no idea how it's going to work out, but is the one who lifts up to Jesus. Well, we've got this. Here's this boy, this young impulse that has 5 loaves and 2 fish. But I don't know what that means. I've always found in struggles in my life, and I find this true again and again and again, that when we encounter struggles, we don't kind of get a lightning bolt of an answer, or at least I don't, and I think many people don't. C.S. Lewis talks about when he's in the grief around the loss of his wife Joy. He writes this in A Grief Observed, that his grief is like this plain of blackness. I've heard people talk about it as kind of the obsidian plain, like everything is black on black, and there's grief and nothing everywhere. And yet, as he sits in this grief and as he sits in his ash heap, there is this small kind of pinprick of hope that appears in the midst of it. That there's this hope beyond hope that begins to show up, and he articulates it much more beautifully and what it's all around. But there's this for all of us when we're in crisis, when we're struggling. There is not this immediate rescuing of the angels breaking open the heavens, but there is this small boy with clearly not enough resources. There's this small little tiny bit that shows up, and that if we pay attention to it, if we notice it, if we bring it up, if we raise it to the consciousness of Christ and say there's this, it manages to enlighten the world, and it manages to feed the 5,000. I think that we're all the two great enemies of this day that we all find ourselves in are fear and despair. They're fear and despair. These are the two great blacknesses of our age. And I think Andrew speaks directly into them. He has this, because he is the one that lifts up the small boy with the 5 barley loaves and the 2 fish. And from there, the very crowd is fed. So that's my favorite thing about Andrew. If you translate Andrew from the Greek, it's a Greek word, Andres, or whatever. It actually literally means strength. And I think it is a testament of strength, and is a testament of our strength when we lift to Jesus not all the things that we have, not all the things that we want, not even all of our brokenness or all of our blackness, but we just lift up our one point of light, whatever it is. We lift up our 5 mealy little loaves and our 2 stinking little fish, and we say, but we have these. And it's from that all manner of things start to kick in. Thanksgiving starts to kick in. Magnify, the magnification of the goodness of a small thing starts to kick in. All manner of ways. There's an infinite number of ways that God uses this and does this. And it's part of what I believe is the really heart of St. Andrew and St. Andrew's Day, is just our little strength to lift up to Christ those meager resources that we might have. And the strength is really at the heart of what Andrew is about. Because you get, so, one of the 12 fishermen, he was one of the 12, a fisherman by trade, and he goes to Greece. So if you don't know, all the disciples after the resurrection, after they receive the Holy Spirit in Acts 1, they all leave each other. They all separate and go different directions to tell the world about what they have encountered in Christ Jesus. That they have encountered the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. They've encountered the Messiah that is not only just for the people of Israel, but is for all humanity. And they strike out to tell the world the good news. Well, Andrew finds himself in Greece. And he's stopped by one of the followers of the Roman gods, Aegeus. And Aegeus says, "Shut up. Look, we don't want to hear about your Jesus guy anymore. Like you're actually damaging the work that we do at the temple. You guys are taking away from our temple worship." Here. We have prostitutes to feed. We have rams to sacrifice. We have blood we have orgies to get on. Leave us. Stop talking about this Jesus guy. You are harshing our mellow. This is, okay, maybe not exactly how Aegeus said it, but you get the idea. And Andrew refuses. And he continues in the city of Patras to tell the story of Jesus. And more people are attracted to this. More and more people find this compelling, and more and more people begin to leave the Roman gods. And as a result of it, he crosses the law, and he is to be martyred. He insists that to be martyred in the same way, which he was going to be crucified, but to be martyred in the same way as Jesus, that he is unacceptable to him. So he says, because he's not worthy. He says, I'm not worthy to be crucified, to die in the same way that Jesus dies. And so instead he is crucified on a cross. So on a great X. His body, his hands and feet are splayed out, and he is crucified on an X rather than on a cross. This great legend will continue on. It will live on in infamy, and as will all of the disciples. Of the 12 disciples, 11 of them die a martyr's death. Stephen is stoned, Thomas is shot with arrows. They all, or maybe James is shot with arrows. I don't know. I think Thomas is killed with a spear. All right, but check me on that later. But they all end a gruesome end for telling the world the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. In 832, the Scots fight a battle, and against the Angles. We think of the Anglo-Saxons as being a kind of a big, we think of the whole thing as being a big harmony now, but back then it was not. There was these great battles, and their leader, the leader of the Scottish people, vowed that to appoint Andrew patron saint of Scotland should they win the battle. And on the day of the battle, so is the story, is that there was a great X formed in the sky over the battlefield, that the clouds actually formed an X over the battlefield. So if you look at the Scottish flag, if you've ever seen an image of the Scottish flag, there is a white X on a blue background. That is the image of the sky that was over the Scots' battlefield as they fought for their survival against the Angles. This image will live on today, and today will be flown all over the world in remembrance of St. Andrew and St. Andrew's Day. There is this way in which that tonight they will sing songs in Scotland. They will burn fires, although not as big as some of the other holidays. and they will lift up the example of this one that has been a part of their lives and their story. Now, whatever you think of this, whatever you think of this story, whether you think it's, yeah, that's what happened, and their calling upon Saint Andrew brought them great and powerful resources and courage and angels to which to fight off the angles, or whether you believe that this is kind of the rationalized hokum of an ancient people. I don't care. Because what I want to suggest to you is that the power of the story in which we dwell, the power of the story in which Andrew lifts up the boy with the fish and Jesus then feeds 5,000, the power of the story that the Scots defeat the Angles in their battle for survival, are realities that you and I are encountering today. The true great enemies of this hour, the true great enemies of this day, are fear and despair. Friends, I invite you to lift up to Christ the meager little stinky fish and rotten and punky bread that you have on board, that Christ may enliven and feed you in the midst of whatever fear is coming around your door, or whatever despair may have hold of your heart. I invite you that whatever battlefield you stand upon, you know that you stand with saints of old, that those who have overcome their fear to stand in courageous places have not done so in just that time and that place, but they have done so in the declaration of Christ for you and with you. That when we begin to speak of things eternal, it doesn't matter if it was 1,200 years ago, or it was yesterday, or it was tomorrow. That courage is courage. That calling upon God is calling upon God. That inviting Christ into the battle and onto the battle with you is, in fact, the greatest and most beautiful and most powerful thing you can do in your life right now. Because it's what all of these cats in the past did again and again and again. We will know fear. We will know discouragement and despair. But will we dwell in them? Or will we, in the spirit of Andrew, lift up what meager light, what meager resources we have, and let Christ Jesus magnify them and feed the world? That's our invitation on St. Andrew's Day. All right, friends, thanks for being a part of this today. I hope you have a great and brilliant and St. Andrew's Day. And in this, I pray that you are well and good and whole. We will pick it up tomorrow with another 11:11. Peace and grace, my friends.